Hello and welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, the podcast about all things travel. Charlie Bosco up here in BC, TT down in CO, down in Denver, which no doubt is sunnier and warmer than it is up here in BC. But today we're not talking about either of those places. We're talking about Europe and the challenges of moving to Europe. I think it's one of those things that you often hear romanticised. Oh, I'd love to live in Italy. Certainly a lot of 500,000 Brits down the years have romanticised the idea of living in Spain enough that they've actually gone and done it. I think there are 500,000 Brits living in Spain right now. Bit trickier since Brexit, but Brexit aside, we thought it might be interesting to talk through the challenges and the realities of moving to Europe and what it's really like, extrapolating your travel experience and my time living there. So, TT, have you ever given serious thought to living in Europe? Would you live in Europe, or do you prefer to live where you are and visit Europe?
That's a good question. I think it's tough. If I had a different life, maybe I would have loved to have lived in Europe. I think when you have kids, it's pretty selfish if I jump ship and moved to Europe and left them in the United States, even though they're a little bit older. So probably for me, it's just kind of, it would either be a pipe dream, it would be a vacation home, or it would be somewhere I just go either visit or go for a couple months for an extended trip. I just can't imagine I would completely give up the United States and move to Europe.
Is that a cultural thing or a geography thing with the kids? I mean, because there's a cultural chasm between the US and, I mean, the gap across the ocean culturally from the US to Europe is as big as the other ocean from, say, the US to Japan. I mean, it's so different.
Well,
would you actually?
I think it depends on where in Europe. I mean, if I moved to Ireland, or pretty much anywhere in the UK where people speak English as their first language, I think it's probably less of a culture shock. Versus I moved to, I don't know, let's say like Latvia. or somewhere that's just really, or somewhere that's not Western European, I think would be tough. I think Spain, Portugal, a place with like a large expat population would be fairly easy. Italy, you start getting to, Bulgaria and some of the countries that you don't hear a lot of people living in from the U.S. I think it would probably be tougher.
Yeah, I agree. Although the language barrier is obviously a huge element, but I think it's actually a cultural barrier, and I actually think it exists between the UK and the US.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned John Sopel's book on here, the former Washington correspondent for the BBC, called "If Only They Didn't Speak English."
Yeah.
And the premise of it is, if Americans didn't speak English, British people would view Americans as more foreign, and ironically might understand them better. But because we speak the same language, Brits think they understand America, and actually Americans say the same words but rarely mean the same thing, and there's a big cultural gap to overcome, as well as a language barrier. But I do know what you mean. The language is a huge element. And just for a bit of context, I grew up in the UK and then spent many years living in France and many years living in Austria, and also had a brief stint in Malta. So kind of moved around Europe a lot in that time, but also lived in different countries. So I think people underestimate the scale of the cultural gap between European countries. I don't know if that's been your observation, but France, Germany, Italy, Spain, that they are so different to me. Is that something that you feel as an American going over?
I think I don't personally, but I'm probably not a typical American in a lot of ways. I'm very well traveled. I did go to college for a little bit in England. It's like I went to Paris recently, and someone I work with was saying, "Oh my God, I hate the French. They're such jerks." And I said, I've been to France half a dozen times, and I've always had like really good experience with the French. They've always been super nice. They were always helpful. They're always polite and even friendly. And we've talked about before, but I dress nice. I'm soft spoken. I'm polite. I don't come in like a bull in a china shop. I don't wear a baseball hat and in a fine restaurant. I don't complain about that there's not enough ketchup or not enough ice in my drink, and I've had great experiences. I think sometimes Americans and I think Brits can kind of be that way too. You get out of your comfort zone and you start whining, complaining, and trying to point out why things are better where you are, where you're from, and you're just never going to be successful that way. And I think most Americans are just, and I hate to say Americans aren't cultured, but a lot of Americans unfortunately aren't, where they're going to go in these places and they're just going to act like it's not America. And I think whenever you have that sense, you're never going to be successful anywhere you go.
I think one thing that you really notice going to Europe is, firstly, I agree about Brits. So of those 500,000 Brits who live in Spain, I wonder how many. Like when I talk about speak your language, I'm not talking about can you go and order your dinner. I mean, how many of those Brits could go for dinner at a Spanish person's house and converse all night with a group of people in Spanish? I'm going to say 1%.
In the Spanish language, language, or just culturally?
No, in the Spanish language.
Yeah.
I would say it would be close to 0%.
Yeah, and I would say probably more Americans know Spanish because of our proximity with Mexico. England's an island.
Yeah, but it's. I think one thing that people underestimate as well when they think about potentially moving to Europe is how baked in those cultures are. And I'm a firm believer that if you move to a country, it's you who should be doing the adapting, not the country. And actually, maybe we'll come back to that because there's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, particularly in the UK right now. And like all these things, it's nuanced. But it's you who should be doing the adjusting. The country should not be doing the adjusting to suit you. And if I think about the many, many dozens of people I know who grew up in the UK but now live in Europe, I would say all of them, with the exception of, I could count on the fingers of one hand how many people have truly amalgamated into the culture. Well, everyone else just lives as an expat.
Well, and what's the point of going to, let's say you move to Spain and you're British, and all your friends are British, and you still eat British food, and you go to little British shops, and you're basically just in a little chunk of Britain, but with better weather. Like, what's the point of doing that? The whole,
because it's got better weather. But that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that they will accept.
Yeah.
The only element of Spain that they will accept is the weather.
Well, then move to Bermuda.
Well, but there's no other element of Spain that they want. None of them are moving there because they like tapas.
Yeah.
Or Spanish music, or the Spanish language or culture. They're only going there because it's sunny. That's it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of sad. I think if you move somewhere, you need to immerse yourself in that culture. I mean, as you know, we talked about last time. I just bought a home in New Orleans as a vacation home, and I have either read or ordered every single book I can possibly find on New Orleans. I've been watching movies that are filmed there, or movies that take place there, and I'll never be like an expert on New Orleans, but for someone who's not from there, I'll probably be in the top 1%. Just give me another few months. When you and I went to North Korea, before we went, I read every single book on North Korea that I could possibly find, and unfortunately, a lot of people just don't have that curiosity in life. They just want to go somewhere, like you have a lot of young Americans, and they go to Thailand, and they go to Vietnam, and they just want to sit on the beach, and they could care less about the culture. Maybe they'll buy a pair of those stupid elephant pants and wear it around and think that's like part of the culture, but to really understand it, what they really want to do is drink beer on the beach and get stuff for cheap. That's
And I'm not holding myself up on a pedestal here. I would say I was an expat in France and I was an expat in Austria, and I did not immerse myself in either French or Austrian culture. So I'm not holding myself up as an example here.
Are you doing it in Canada?
Well, Canada doesn't really have a lot of culture. And that's not meant as a criticism. Jean Chrétien, who was Prime Minister here in the late 90s, early 2000s, said Canada is the only country that knows how to live without an identity. And there isn't. And it's not a criticism.
I think the identity has always been in Canada, it's just not America.
Canada identifies more what it's not than what
Yeah.
it is. You're absolutely right.
But-
They identify as not American.
But what about?
just
But is there culture in like Montreal and Quebec?
Well, no, not having culture sounds awful. There's fantastic food, there's fantastic restaurants, there's traditions, the indigenous people, there's stories fascinating here. Canada's a fascinating place, but what it doesn't have is baked in societal norms and traditions. So the way that I socialise could be completely different from the way my neighbour socialises. How much I drink, what I like to eat, how I play sport, everything. Everyone has their own way of doing it.
Yeah.
And when you go like Austria, there's just a way to socialise. There is no divergence in that.
Do Austrians socialize?
Mainly within their own families. I mean, reproduction as well. No, I'm only kidding. I wouldn't want to speculate, but yeah, what I was about to say just a second ago was about me being an expat. Is part of that was language, and I made an effort with French and German, but I could have made more effort. But the reality is that it was the cultural gap that was hard to cross, and I naturally found myself gravitating towards other British people.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we just had a kinship that, language aside, I didn't have with the average French person, the average Austrian person. So I'm certainly not holding myself up as an example here. I think it's important to understand that it's incredibly hard to amalgamate into a European culture that isn't your own. And I don't think that's a British or American thing. I think if a Spanish person moved to Germany, it would be just as hard for them to move as me to Germany.
Yeah.
So there's just a cultural chasm to overcome. But just quickly in answer to your question about Austrians socialising, they do socialise, but in very specific ways. I don't really know how it is in the States or if everyone does it different. But in Europe, if you say, come for dinner at 7:30, you don't expect them to turn up until 20 to 8. Like 7:30 means within 20 minutes after 7:30. And then everyone would have a drink, and then you'd have dinner, and then you'd have more drinks. And one time we went round for dinner at our new neighbour's house in Austria, who spoke fantastic English, luckily, because we were learning German at the time, but we certainly couldn't have gone for dinner. And they said, come round at 8. Come for dinner at 8. So, okay, yeah, great. So we turn up, I don't know, 9 minutes past 8. And the woman opened the door and goes, you're late. The food is all burned. And literally, I don't know, they were literally expecting us to walk in at 8 and immediately just sit and eat. And that's fine. Every culture is different, but that was not the norm for us. And it just every social interaction, you feel more than a language barrier. There's a subtlety in the way that people live that I think is really hard to, and really hard to break into, and you have to fully embrace it.
Yeah, and it depends on where you are I mean, Austria's little, but in the United States, if you tell someone to be at dinner at 6 or 6:30 or whatever, depends on what part of the country are they're,
Really?
Yeah, because some places are, like the South is probably more punctual. Other places are more laid back and will be late. So it can really, really vary.
Yeah. And it also, the people of the countries, I don't want to generalise, but there are traits. Like if you hang out with enough French people, you do notice some traits with French people. And you just have to be okay with those idiosyncrasies if you move somewhere. Otherwise, you just have to be an expat, which is absolutely fine. But to me, I would never feel at home being an expat. It's like living in Dubai or something. It's never going to be... I could live in Dubai the rest of my life. It's not going to be home.
Yeah.
It's just a place where I lay my head down. So you have to kind of accept the idiosyncrasies of the people that are around you and not let them bug you, and more or less embrace them.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, and I was thinking about this today, why people go out of their own country and why they want to go other places. Some people do it, I think, for work, or they do it to give their families a better life because they're leaving someplace that's war torn. I think some people, especially some young single people, do it because they either, on one hand, they view a location as what makes them happy, so they're always searching for a location instead of looking for happiness within. And then I think some people like the attention, and I think you're American and you're in your 20s and you've really got nothing going for you that makes you interesting. So you start going around South America and you're always the American and you always get attention. And I find it kind of fascinating why some people do that or need that. But for some people, their travel is the only thing in their entire life that makes them an interesting person, and I think that's really sad.
Yeah, but don't put yourself down.
I feel like I'm interesting regardless of travel, but there's some people that I've met there's some people I've met that are very well traveled and they are fascinating people. And then there's other people that are very well traveled, and it's like if you took that one aspect away from them, they would be the most boring person in the history of the world, and it's the only thing that makes them interesting.
Yeah, because I think to get a lot out of travel, you have to get a lot out of little things.
Yes, you have to have a curious nature.
Yeah, you can't just go, okay, this year I ticked off the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, Shibuya Crossing in Tokyo, and you're compiling this list of stuff you've done.
Yeah.
The interest is in the details. It's in this tiny restaurant you found, or this item of clothing that you notice a lot of people wear, or the way that people ride bikes everywhere in some European cities. It's picking very random things, but it's details that you see as you travel that make it interesting. So I absolutely agree.
Well, it's like when Lonely Planet guides are so huge. I don't think guidebooks are as popular as they once were, but I mean, there's people and they would get the Lonely Planet guide to wherever, and they would every single thing they would do was out of that guidebook, and they would not venture one other thing.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about why I moved abroad, but actually, I just wanted a lifestyle that is not possible in the UK.
And what was that?
My life would have been so much easier if I just stayed in England, but I couldn't live how I wanted to live
because of your outdoors hobbies.
Yeah, and lots of people are into it in the UK, but I did a year abroad in New Zealand between high school and university, and I guess once you've kind of broken out of living in the UK, your mind is open to it in the future. And then I got a job in the French Alps, and I just remember getting there and thinking, well, I'm not going back.
Yeah,
this is too, and so it's only a lifestyle thing. I don't need to go and live in different places, but the things I like doing and the lifestyle I want to live, I can't live in the UK. So,
what's the tallest mountain in the
UK? Ben Nevis.
How tall is it?
It's 1,347 meters. I know that because I've been up there a ton of times climbing in winter. So what's that?
4,500 feet or something.
500 feet.
Yeah.
Like that.
So I'm higher up. I'm higher up in Denver right now than
exactly
than the tallest mountain.
It's a pretty serious mountain, actually, Ben Nevis. Like, it's full on. It's got a really big, steep, imposing north face. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I just couldn't really live the life I wanted to live there. So that's why I don't live there. But thinking about now I'm in Canada, and the big difference, we wandered off topic slightly, but the big difference between here and Europe is this feels like home. And I never felt like France or Austria would be my home.
Yeah.
And if I again think about the people I know who live there, I think they're all expats, and I'm not giving them a hard time because I was too, but it's not their home.
Yeah.
They're not culturally French or Austrian in most cases. They're not. Their language skills are not good enough that if you just went, like most of the people I know in France, if they went round to a French person's house and the French person said, hey, we're going to speak French tonight, my mum and dad are in town or whatever, almost everyone I know would be screwed. They just couldn't speak good enough French. So to me, if you can't speak good enough, the language well enough that you can go for dinner at someone's house and have a conversation in that language, you're not at home. You only live in that country according to the map.
Yeah.
By no other measurement do you live in that country. And that was true of me. And so I wanted to live somewhere where I could feel at home. And I think people underestimate how hard it is to feel at home in Europe. Even a European in another European country.
Do you think it helps you in Canada that the part of Canada that you're living is British at one point or came from England?
Yeah. I mean, I always joke as well because we're becoming Canadian next year. We're going to do citizenship. get passports, be Canadian. That no one's from here. More or less, if you're a white person, you're hard pushed to say that you're from Canada. Certainly, it's hard pushed to say you're from BC.
Yeah.
Because BC was settled so recently that I'm struggling to think if I've met anyone here who could go back past their grandparents and have people in Canada.
Wow.
So yeah, more or less, nobody is from here, and that actually suits me because we're not from here. I'm not from here, so it just makes it very easy to amalgamate into, because everyone's essentially come from somewhere else, ended up living in this lovely place, and they're just living the life they want to live. So it's a great fit for me.
And back to kind of the topic is, I know very, very few people that have actually moved to Europe from the United States. And when they do, it seems to almost always be Spain or Portugal.
Yeah. And what's the reason that people move? Is it generally they married a Spanish person?
I think that's a good question. I think a lot of it is they marry someone that's Spanish, or they studied Spanish in school, so they don't really want to live in Mexico, so they end up going to Spain and then kind of getting stuck there. Spain and Portugal aren't super expensive for us. They're fairly easy for people to immigrate to. They have fairly lax laws when it comes to gaining citizenship, and the weather's really nice. The food is familiar. Sometimes you'll hear people about Italy, but it seems like they're usually like Italian background that go there. Very, very rarely do you hear someone going to the UK from the US. Maybe Ireland if they have like an Irish passport or something, but extremely rare. And then, God, you just never hear of anybody moving to like Sweden or Germany or like any of those places. Like, I think it's extremely rare.
Yeah, and actually, it reminds me, Charlie Kirk, who is no longer around, but said a lot of pretty unsavory things about a lot of people, but did make sense on a few topics. And he used to say America is the only country in the world where its people just constantly complain about it and never leave. And it's so true. I mean, America is just the most magnificent place to live, and it's got huge faults.
Yeah.
But then, if you're an American and you think it sucks living in America, go and live in Austria.
Yeah.
Austria is an amazing place, but you will not believe how different it is.
Yeah.
And unless you are an incredibly un-American American, really open to a different culture, a different way of life, a different type of economy and personal finance, because you get taxed to death in Austria and Germany, places like that. Unless you're really open to that, you're going to hate it. Yeah. You are going to absolutely hate it, and you're going to want to come back. So, yeah, especially an American, if you're an American moving to Europe, I would say A, be careful what you wish for, and B, be aware that unless you go in with both feet and go, I don't mind paying 50% tax, I don't mind living in a condo because I can't afford a house, I don't mind being around people who are absolutely stuck in their ways, and that's not a criticism of Austria. They've just been there a long time, and the way things are done is well established. If you're not willing to accept that stuff, it is going to suck.
Well, and people ask me a lot because they know I travel, and they'll say, they ask a few questions, but one they ask is, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live? And I always say, well, how much money do I have in that scenario?
Yeah.
It's like, do you have?
Because if I had all the money in the world, I'd live in America.
Well, if you have unlimited money, everywhere's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a war-torn country, but
I'd split the year as well. There's no way I'd live in one place. I had all that money.
Yeah, you'd have multiple homes probably, and what does it matter if you're living in the fanciest part of wherever you are, unless it's in Haiti or somewhere, and then if you don't have much money, then you get stuck with South America or Southeast Asia, because they're the only places you can really afford if you don't have a lot of money. Or you're just some kind of weird creep and you want to be like an old white guy living by yourself in Thailand.
Which it seems a lot of old white guys do seem to want to do Gary Glitter, who I actually looked up the other day. He came up in conversation with someone, and sadly is still alive, but
I know.
Hopefully soon to be over.
What a horrible man he was. Even though I really thought he did some great music, but so did Michael Jackson.
Yeah, what a horrible way to live a life. Soon to be over, hopefully.
But I'm always weirded out if I'm flying on a plane by myself to some of those places. Like, do people think I'm one of those old creepy guys flying there to do God knows what? I
don't think many of them dress like you.
hopefully not. Thank you. I would take that as a compliment.
Oh no, it is a compliment. You've got better dress sense than a 60-year-old paedophile. No, you're the snappiest dresser I know. But no, ultimately, I think moving somewhere comes down to whether you can feel at home and what that means, and whether it matters to you. Plenty of people live as expats their whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew a woman in France, and she'd grown up in Monaco. Her walk to school was around Monaco Harbour. She was a Monegasque. She was. You can't be a Monegasque unless you fulfill certain criteria. But so she was a French citizen, but she considered herself to be Monegasque from Monaco, and she said, "Oh, my folks are English, but that's why I speak English as well as I speak French, but they've lived there 50 years." I said, "They've lived in Monaco 50 years." And she said, "Yeah, they moved in their early 20s and were still there in their mid-70s.
Wow.
And I said, "What's their language like?" And she said, "They can just order a croissant at the bakery. Like, that's the limit of their French."
Yeah.
And I just thought, isn't that amazing? To live your whole life in a place and still be a complete outsider.
It's super
strange.
Mind you,
Monaco's English.
It's super strange because, I mean, if you're in your 60s and you move somewhere, you're probably not going to take immersive language lessons. It's just, but if you're in your 20s, why not just start taking French lessons in like, why wouldn't you want to do that?
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah,
but that's what I mean. A lot of people that move to another European country that isn't their own essentially accept that they will be outsiders forever. And that's kind of where I was at, except I thought, well, I don't want to do this forever.
Yeah.
I want to live somewhere that could be home.
And I think some people like that. I don't think older couples like being outsiders, and I don't think they go and they're like, I love being the American here, and I love the attention. But I think some young people really like that.
You think so?
I think you really like that. I mean, I think you've got okay. So
Here goes.
Remember when we went to North Korea? You remember that?
I remember.
So I went to China. We actually both went to China, but we weren't friends at that point. Before that, and I thought China was when we were in Beijing, and I remember staying where I was staying, and I don't remember where that was, but in Beijing somewhere, and looking around, going to restaurants and stuff, and it was a land of dorky, nerdy, young white guys from America that would never be able to get a date in their life, with the cutest, prettiest young Chinese girls riding bikes with them and hanging out with them in parks and doing stuff. And it's like, and it's no knock on the Chinese. I mean, it's obviously they're going to be attracted to somebody who's going to give them a lifestyle that they want, and especially if they grow up really poor in urban Beijing, and someone comes along that's American and has some money and some stuff. Of course, they're going to find that attractive. But I just thought it was like so gross, and it's like, and you see some of these guys, and you're like, I know why you came here. It's not because you want to learn the culture. It's because nobody will date you because you're a weird, creepy dork, and now you're coming to some other country to get attention. And I think some women do the same thing. They don't go to China, but some women will go to South America, because or they'll go to Mexico, and they might not be that desirable in the United States, but they kind of have the reverse thing there, and all of a sudden they're the queen bee in their little town in Panama or wherever, because they're the American girl and they've got blonde hair, and it doesn't matter that they look like a sack of potatoes and they have a horrible personality, and I think sometimes young people are attracted to that, and I just think a lot of that's gross.
I agree.
And I don't really have a point to that other than I think it's gross. It's like taking advantage of another culture that maybe isn't quite as successful monetarily as ours, and going in and kind of swooping in as like, look at me, and getting all that attention. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. I'd never been to Thailand apart from I've been transited through Bangkok airport a couple of times, and the really creepy looking people count was incredibly high. Like I could feel my skin crawling. A few people walked past, and it just made my toes tingle.
Yeah, I don't.
It was so weird.
And I try not to judge who people love and who they fall in love with, but I think if you're a guy and your wife is younger than your kids, because it's like your second marriage, and you went to some other country and got her, I think you should do some soul searching.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Anyone whose marriage involved a direct financial transaction with an agency really needs to question themselves a little bit. I've never lived in Asia. Who knows what that's like?
I haven't either. I would imagine living in Asia as someone from the West would be really, really difficult. I think it'd be really difficult.
But do you remember when we were in North Korea, the guides there were Westerners? I think we had an English guy and an American guy. I don't remember who the other guide was. And they both lived in Beijing.
But they had Chinese wives.
Yeah, but from what I could tell, their Chinese language skills were certainly in the American guy non-existent. I think the English guy kind of got around okay.
Yeah.
But that you are a bit like I said about when I lived in France, and a lot of the people I know that still live there. You only really live in Beijing on a map.
Yeah.
You are not you're not going around to a Chinese person's house speaking their language and understanding their culture. And that's fine, but that is just my word of warning with people thinking about moving to Europe. It is fantastic, but you gotta go in with both feet. You gotta go all in, and you gotta accept that the people are not going to think what you're used to the average person thinking. And I think that's something you notice in cultures. Actually, in America, it's just assumed that there are some values that are shared, no matter where you live on the political spectrum.
Yeah.
It feels like there are some things that everyone is just united on. Not many. And that's the same in Europe. And you better get on board with those things, or you're not going to feel very at home, because people are generally, 1% at either end of the political spectrum are not going to be aligned, but 98% of people in any country are pretty much aligned on the basics of how society and politics and economics works. And yeah, when you move to a new European country, you've got to get on board with that, or you're going to feel pretty like an outsider.
Do they want you there?
Depends on the country. I think in any country, if you go and you pay your tax and you're respectful and you don't expect the country to bend to your wishes, I don't get the impression many people mind.
Well,
again, you've got a few people who've gone off the deep end and are into racial purism and stuff, but more or less, I think, if you're a decent person who abides by the rules and tries to fit in as best you can, you're welcome in most countries.
Well, and it's easy for us to say because we can just keep our mouth shut and we look like we're European.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah.
And I think it'd be a lot tougher. I think it'd be really tough if you're like a Black American.
Yeah.
And
much like if you're a Black American who moves to Innsbruck in Austria, that's tough.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of Black Americans there.
And I just feel like they're not
Scandinavia.
And I just feel like they're not going to be probably. I'm not saying they're racist people. I just don't know that they're going to be super welcoming, and you're going to stand out. You can't just keep your mouth shut and go to the store and buy stuff, and nobody knows if you're from there or not.
Well, you're visibly different. Yeah, for sure. You and I have experienced that. If I go to if you're walking around Japan, it doesn't matter if you speak Japanese like a Japanese literature scholar.
Yeah.
you look different. Like, as soon as you walk in, you are immediately identified as not being from there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that would make it a lot harder. It's definitely easier.
So where are the most welcoming places in Europe, do you think?
To go and move to?
Yeah.
I think they're all welcoming if you stick to the criteria I said, which is learn the language, be respectful, stick to the rules. I think Germany is a pretty easy, relatively easy country to move to.
Especially like Berlin or somewhere that's more cosmopolitan.
If you're moving to Berlin and your English is not your first language, I've had several people who live in Berlin say to me, "You are much better to learn English and German. It'll get you much further in Berlin."
Yeah.
So Berlin, yeah. I think also Germany, and I'm not speaking out of turn here. I've got a lot of German friends. Used to live half an hour from the German border. Spent lots of time in Germany. So I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but there is a hangover from the war in Germany, and they are so eager not to be associated with what went on.
Yeah,
that they've almost made a much more concerted effort to be clearly welcoming in order to not be associated with what happened before.
Yeah, I just watched this week. I just saw Nuremberg, the movie.
Oh, is it good? It's with Russell Crowe.
It's really, really good. But they show the map on there of all the camps, and how there was an unbelievable amount of camps, like 1,500 or something. And it's like, not to get too political, but yeah, they should feel bad because how in the world could people not have realized what was going on with 1,500 camps in your little tiny country exterminating people?
I think there are a lot of blind eyes turned. But equally, no one alive now, certainly maybe technically alive, but no one alive that you're going to interact
was
with.
there, yeah.
Was there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You can't hold it against them, but I do think that Germans have made a massive effort in the last 70, 80 years to be incredibly welcoming and provide a contrast to what came before.
Yeah.
So I think Germany, relatively easy. I think Spain, again, you need to be an expert. Like to actually become Spanish, effectively a Spanish person would be really hard.
Yeah.
But if you just want to be an expat, Spain's got to be the easiest place in the world to move because it's just full of English people. I mean, you go somewhere like Benidorm or like somewhere awful like that on the Spanish coast, it's just England.
Yeah.
All the signs are in English, everybody speaks English, all the restaurants are English. It's just...
Or go to Gibraltar.
Yeah, Gibraltar, but I would say Germany. I'd say France is a very hard country to move to.
What's the worst? Would you say France? Or what's the hardest?
Well,
other than Belarus or something.
Yeah, I haven't attempted to live in many European countries, but I think if you're really, again, we're talking about becoming part of the country. We're not talking about buying a house and finding some expats to hang out with. We're talking about really amalgamating yourself. I think France would be hard. I think the French culture is incredibly alien to Brits in a way that Brits don't realise because France is right there. A lot of people might have gone to France even as kids. Like, if you live in the south of England, it's pretty easy to go to France on a school trip. So lots of Brits, a majority of Brits, I don't know what it would be. I would imagine a majority of Brits have been to France.
Do you think...
And it's easy to underestimate how big that gap is.
Do you think your kids will consider themselves British or Canadian?
They came here when they were 2 and 3, so I think they'll consider themselves Canadian. But I would love them to have a foot in Europe.
Yeah.
They have Irish passports, so they're Brexit proof. And I would really encourage them to go and do a ski season in France or go and work on a yacht in Greece or something. Go and enjoy Europe because they've got an amazing opportunity to go and explore it, and having European parents and European family means that it's not a big deal for them to go to Europe. They already have a tie to it, so I think they'll feel Canadian, but who knows? They were born in Austria, so I don't think they feel any kinship to Austria, but yeah, we'll see as they grow up, but I'd love them to have a foot in both camps. I think if you can do what you and I do, which is have experienced a lot of both continents. Albeit I've experienced more of Europe and you've experienced North America, but if you can experience both of the Western continents, then I think that's you're pretty lucky.
Yeah, and it even kind of gets a microcosm. You talk about BC, but I moved to Colorado when I was 1 year old, and my grandparents had lived in Colorado before that at one time, or my great grandparents, and you hardly meet anybody in Colorado that's from Colorado. That's my age. Almost nobody.
Well, look how big it was when you moved there.
Yeah.
And now how big it is.
Yeah, but there's always a sense of like people from Colorado. We kind of look down on people, that aren't really from here. And
you know what? Talking about these European countries, I'm sure if you dug deep enough, you would find that in every country.
Yeah.
And much as I say, Canada's home, I'll never be a Canadian. I'm going to have a Canadian passport next year, hopefully, but I'll always be different. I'll always have a different hinterland culturally. I'll always have a different accent. So
yeah.
I'm not making out you can come to another... I suppose my whole point in the 40 minutes we've been talking is it's bloody hard, if not impossible, to go and amalgamate into another culture. That's it. But I do know a couple of people who've really managed it, so maybe it's not impossible, but it's bloody hard.
Well, and even on this podcast, we've talked about some of the cultural things, but we haven't talked about any of the logistics of it. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast.
Well, that's the other thing. No, but I mean, if we could have got into the States visa logistically as easy as if we could have chosen between the US and Canada, I really don't know which one I would have chosen. But I couldn't live in the States now, even if I wanted to, and never will be able to. I will never be able to live in the States. So
yeah,
the logistics is obviously a factor. But a lot of the time, especially if you're under 30, you can find a way. And if you marry a citizen from another country, it might take a bit of paperwork, but you're probably going to end up being allowed to live there eventually.
Yeah, because some places you can't really own property and stuff if you're not a citizen, and it just gets really.
BC's got a lot of that, yeah. About where you can and can't buy property, what your status is and things. But yeah, logistics is definitely an issue. Yeah. I'll never be allowed to live in America unless I get a job. If you get a job offer.
Well, and that's
more or less.
That's one of the things that always worries me about buying a home in you buy a home in South America or Central America or Asia. And some government comes in and they just say, "Yeah, we're taking over all the properties that are owned by foreigners, and you just lose your property." I mean, it gets kind of.
And that's a real thing.
Yeah, it is a real thing.
That happened a lot in Brexit, because a lot of back then Britain was in the EU.
Yeah.
A lot of people owned holiday homes, and there is no point getting French residency if you've got a British passport. Why bother? You might as well just go back to the UK occasionally.
Yeah.
You could basically live in France and never put your hand up and actually become a resident. And then suddenly you could only go for 90 days. You couldn't work.
Yeah.
Couldn't do anything. So, yeah, it's a dangerous game trying to live in two countries, that's for sure. Sadly, my finances do not permit it, but one day I would love to split the year between 3 or 4 places.
Yeah, I think that would be ideal.
I've had this conversation so many times. What would your year be if you could,
Again, how much money do I have?
No, let's say you got a ton of money.
If I fly my private jet to,
Mate, let's say you're not
to Epstein's Island or something.
You're not flying a private jet, but you own your properties outright, and you got a 6-figure income.
Yeah.
Then it's a real I love thinking about it, but I've already got mine planned out. I know I'm good.
Where would yours be?
I'd probably spend January, February in Japan.
Okay.
Just skiing. The skiing in Japan's amazing. Then probably spend March and the first half of April in the Alps. I'd spend middle of April. Oh God, I really have thought about this, haven't I? Middle of April to end of May in Norway. I'd come over here for summer, North America, like
Yeah.
Western United States, Canada. It just doesn't get any better than
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
And then I'd go to the Mediterranean for October, November.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
That'd be me. There you go. I told you I thought about it. You thought about it, or do we need to come back to that one?
Not really. I do think that like I love Colorado in the summer. It's awesome in the summer. I don't
Yeah,
travel
I don't
a
want to
lot.
go anywhere in summer.
It's
I just
beautiful.
Love North America is just.
It's beautiful.
Epic.
I'd probably be happy in Colorado for a big chunk of the year. Maybe go somewhere in the fall for a little bit, and then I actually like being here for like Christmas because it's the seasons and it's snowy, and then after Christmas, like beginning of January, maybe go somewhere for a few months until it's spring and then come back.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I'd like you want to go somewhere every 2 months. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
maybe
know
not
that I
that-
want to
maybe-
do that. Maybe I don't.
I'm all talk.
Yeah, maybe two, 3 places would be plenty for me, because I do like kind of growing roots a little bit and
No, that's true. You know what? I'll do the scrap Japan. I'll do winter in the Alps, summer in North America, and then a nice trip to the Mediterranean, and maybe a little bit of Norway in the shoulder season just for a few weeks. That'd do me.
Yeah, that does sound nice. Yeah, Japan would be awesome.
Yeah, but actually, yeah, all right. I can live without that. You make a good point. All right, I got to run.
Okay, well, this is fun.
That was fun. I always enjoy riffing, and but I know both of us are about to go and watch the Broncos now, so
Yes, let's hope
go Broncos.
let's hope they can keep that streak going.
all right, enjoy.
Thank you.